Hey guys, it's Gary again. I just wanted to go over this waterfall model that I sent out to a lot of people. I'm going to go over the instructions again, and I'm going to go over what each waterfall does internally and through the process. So it'll be a little bit of a longer video, but at the same time, it'll be very educational. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to be talking about the layout first of what the files are. So you can see on the bottom here that we have five different files. The first file that you should look at is the instructions. The instructions have how all the layout should be and what everything is. Very informative. Please look at it. There's a lot going on here, and it's very helpful to go over it, even if you've watched the video. The main page is this waterfall overview tab. This tab basically will have an overview of all three waterfalls that I've sent out. So you have the green waterfall, the blue waterfall, and the orange waterfall. In order to run the calculations for the waterfall, click on this tab, Queries and Connections. On the right hand side, a pop-up will appear where we have three different waterfalls, each corresponding to the different waterfalls. So the top, if you click on it, and you go to table design, you can actually see the name of the waterfall. It says equity waterfall IRR input. The second one is compounding, and the third is equity multiple. So you have IRR, compounding, and equity waterfall. And in the bottom, you have the corresponding colors responding to the corresponding waterfalls. So this page has summaries of the waterfalls, from distributions to the amount invested, the hurdle splits, as well as distributions, the capital return, the profit, and then the totals. And then we go into some nitty-gritties of the ROI, the equity multiple, the XIR, the regular IR, and then just the total returns that everyone receives per waterfall. And you can compare them apples to apples from one waterfall to another waterfall. The way in which that you run this waterfall. So I'll just go through the basics first. And you can integrate this with your own Excel model as well. You can just reference over here the amount the LPs are investing, the amount the GPs are investing, the starting date. The dates need to be in months, day, years. And then over here you have the splits. Very helpful to go over the splits if you want anything. If you want to end the splits early, you can either just delete them and it'll work just fine, or you can just make one of them to 0, and it'll end the calculations there, and it won't hit the later splits. Just so you know, and you can play around with that. If you wanted to add more distributions, so you can see here, if I refresh this tab, it'll actually send me to the waterfall page, and you can see we have the 900,000, the 100,000, and then the 6 distributions that we have. Let's first add in a few more years. Let's say distributions lasted a few more years. You can go over here, classic Excel formatting way, add a few more years in. Let's add in a few more dollar amounts. Okay, there's another $500,000 invested. Then you can click refresh. And you can see here that we added in 3 more years. And we're doing more distributions over here of exactly those distributions. So distributions that we've hit. And then you can see here that there was $3.5 million invested. The GPs made 738. The LPs made 2,761. And you can go through over here the details of how that's actually split up. Watch each one. So you can see over here we hit this third hurdle. And I'll go through this in detail in a few minutes. But you can see this $500,000 was returned in this hurdle. And this is the amount received as well over here. And the split between the GPs and the LPs. So let's just talk a little bit about what each waterfall is and how they work and how the calculations work. Something to note: every single waterfall is different. The calculations are going to be done for almost every single waterfall you see, but it's important to know the fundamentals and the basics of what's actually going on. And this is a tool that will help you be able to visually understand the basics of what's going on. So the first model that we have here is waterfall I like to call IRR. It's commonly referred to that, where you're accruing and compounding investments over time. So every year we're going to say the first hurdle is going to have a 1%, 10%, sorry. And that's going to get accrued and compound year over year over year. But it also works backwards. And if you don't get this, it's totally fine. You can reach out to me. We can have a conversation about it. It's per date. So it's really less than if you were to split it up into 12 months, it would be something around 8%. It's actually going to be a little bit less than that because you're accruing and compounding. It's growing over time, right? Everyone wants their money compounding and accruing over time. So that's this model right here, and I'll work through the logic. The second model is just accruing without the compounding. And the third model is equity multiple. Straight up equity multiple of the distributions returned. So let's look through a little bit of the math of what's going on, and we'll play around with the numbers, and you'll see exactly how it's working. Also, one thing to note, these splits are the most common way splits are done. So when you see 75-25%, it's actually 75-25 split of the amount the LP is invested. So you take 75% and 25% of the 90%, which is 67.5% and 32.5% respectively for the LP and the GP. And then same thing over here, you're taking 70% of the 90%, which is 63, and 37, and etc. and etc. The reason that this is done like this, it's just a standard. Most GPs are investing in the deal as LPs. So that's the way the calculations are done. There are other ways to do calculations. There are two other ways beyond the scope of this video, but happy to reach out if you have any questions about exactly how that works. So let's go into the actual calculations. Over here, you'll see that the pre-hurdle amount is $900,000. This $900,000, the amount to distribute in this hurdle is $990,000. So in 1 year, we need to make 10%. That's 10%, 90,000. So it's multiply this number, it's $900,000 by 1.1 and get the 990,000. Same thing in year 2. We're taking that $990,000 and we're now multiplying that number by 1.1. So you get this number of 108,000, a little less than $1.1 million. In year 3, we're doing the same thing, but this year, and this is important to note, there is a leap year in there. There's an extra day, so that's why we're seeing this extra $212.84. It's because it's a leap year. The way the calculations work, and this is just something good to know, is that it doesn't go by from date to date. It doesn't go by yearly countings. It goes by physical date. So if there's an extra date in the year, it will actually now compound. And I can show you this in a second how this works. You can go back to waterfall instructions. 1 second, sorry. So this was in 2028. So if we go over the waterfall overview and we go to 2028 and we want to change this date to now 12, 1 day earlier, and now we run the calculations. I'm just going to wait a second for the calculations to run. There we go. You can actually see in 2028, it changes. It goes back to 1.089 and then a little bit less. And now the 4th year has an extra date. So just important to note that this is how the calculations work. Let's just change the numbers back so we can have them back the same. And that's how it's working. So let's go back to the IRR. Let's look at this calculations. So every year we're accruing. We get from this number to this number, and then we multiply. We got from this number to this number, and then we multiply it by 1.1. We take this; it's the same exact number, multiply it by 1.1. Now, when we get to the first actual distributions, we're going to see that we have a little bit less than $1.6 million. The $900,000 of the LPs ballooned to almost $1.6 million. That's almost $700,000 of preferred return. So this $700,000 is going to be returned first along with GP's amount. So you can see here on the top, we're doing the same thing for the GP. 100,000 multiplied by 1.1, etc., 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 etc. And the LP and the GPs will receive 77,202. After that is returned, we will also be returning capital. Up here you can see capital returned in this. So we have $900,000 return to capital and $100,000 return for the LPs. And then in year 3, we're doing the same thing. We're multiplying. We're getting to this 20% now. So it's $900,000 multiplied by 1.2, get to 1.08. Same thing year 2. Sorry about that. We're taking this number, multiplying by 1.2, by 1.2, etc., etc., etc. And then we get to this 268,000. Now for this hurdle, this little bit less than $2.7 million, we subtract the original 900,000 because we're not returning that here, just like we didn't return in the first hurdle. And we're also subtracting the original a little less than $700,000. So the amount to distribute after that is going to be a little bit over $828,000. But realize that this is going to be 67.5%. So if we do some cross multiplication, so we know that the 828,000 is going to be 67% of the total. So what is the total? It's going to be 1.22 million. You can just, and then you can see here that the LP amount is 3.39. And you can see that this distribution is, but we don't, okay, so that this distribution is 3/4 of this. But at the same time, you can see that we don't hit the bottom amount. The reason that we don't hit this is because there was not enough to distribute within this hurdle. So what do? We now distribute it in later distributions. So we'll go to the later ones, and we see here that there's $500,000, and we'll distribute it here. But we can easily just change this from $3 million to $7 million. And now let's run the calculations again. And we'll see here that the $7 million is we're distributing it year after year. So in this model, the important thing to note is that we're accruing and compounding year over year over year. It makes the distributions, the LP amount to distribute a lot more. It accrues and compounds over time. As opposed to the second model, which is just compounding, which is just accruing without the compounding. So if we look at the second model, we'll see the same $900,000 over here, and we'll add $90,000, which is 10%. And the same year, we're just adding that $90,000. We're not taking it 10% of that of the preferred returns, $90,000 from the year before. Same thing here. We're taking $90,000, but this is a leap year as well, so it's a little bit more than $90,000. Then you can see here exactly we're adding only $90,000, $90,000, $90,000. Well, here you can see that the distributions we're going to do it the same exact way. We're going to take the 1.4, a little bit more than 1.4, subtract the original $900,000 from it. It's going to be a little bit more than $540,000. And we'll distribute that to the LP, while the GP will make $60,000. We're doing the same thing, calculations right here on top. And then we're also going to distribute the capital here as well. And then year after year, we'll do the same calculations that we did before. $900,000 multiplied by 2% is now an extra $180,000. Now we're just adding $180,000 year over year over year over year. But over here, instead of distributing $1.98 million minus the $900,000, we're doing the $1.98 million minus the original capital, the $900,000, minus the $540,000 that they already received in the previous hurdle, which is only $540,000. And this is 67.5% of the total distribution, which is $800,000. The way to get this number is cross multiplying. This is key, right? So we need to make sure that the LPs are hitting this 20%. I understand I'm going a little bit fast. It can be a little bit complicated, but you can listen to it over and over and over again. This $900,000 over here, it's very important that this compounding 10% is 20% for the LP. So at the end of the day, we need to make sure that the LPs are hitting the 20% and not that the deal is hitting 20%. So we know that this number is $540,000. We can then cross multiply. Since we know it's 67.5%, we're going to multiply it by 100, then divide it by 32.5%, which will get us this whole number. And then we can multiply this number out by 67.5 and by 32.5%, and we can get these numbers. You can do it in your calculator. You can pause the video. That's what I would recommend. Do the 540,246 multiplied by 100 and then divided by the 0.675 by 600 by 67.5, sorry, and then you'll get this $800,000, and now multiply this by 67.5 and you'll get 540 back, right? Because we just did that reversed. And if you take this number and multiply it by 32.5, you'll get the $260,000. And you can do this for all remaining hurdles. But you have to realize also that these returns are going to be less for the LP because we're not compounding, we're only accruing. So you can see here, let's take away 48,000, a little bit less than 2.4 million. Then we have the $640,000 over here, return to the GP, and we can look at the deal IRR. The IRR is going to be the same because it's just accruing compounding over time. Same thing with the deal IRR, but the equity multiple will be different for the GP and the the IRRs, the deal IRRs will be the same, but over time they will be different because there's different amounts being distributed to the GP and the LP. It's just important to know these differences, and then you can actually see these differences when running your calculations, so that so that you can see which model works best for you. Okay, here it's the same thing. Okay, so for this model, this is my equity multiple model. The equity multiples are the percentages on top of the capital return. So you're going to already receive the capital return. That's what we're returning first, and then you're going to receive for the pref it's 10%, then it's 50%, then it's 0.5 times, 1.5 times, 2.5 times. And if we go to the equity multiple tab, we'll see this stated exactly what's going on. So you'll see here it's 900,000 goes to 990,000, which is the 10%. The 900,000 goes to 1.35, which is 0.5, which is $450,000 on top of the 900,000. This is 1.5%, so it's 1.5% times on top of the $900,000. It's 2.5 times on top of the $900,000, etc. And then once these hurdles are hit, once the $900,000 are returned, we go straight to the next hurdle. Once the amount to distribute for each investor is hit. So in this hurdle, the LP amount is $360,000 because we already distributed $900,000, and we do the cross multiplication again. 67.5% gets you to this 0.33 number. So that's how we get the $17,000. For year 4, we're doing the same exact thing. We take this $861,000 because we're subtracting the $360,000, the $90,000. Take this $93,000, and we cross multiply it out to get this number, and then you can cross multiply back to get the LP amount and the GP amount. There's a lot to digest here. I know it's a long video. If you have any questions, please reach out. Something cool also, I'll just make a note of it, is that you can actually, let's take the IRR. You can take this details over here, copy and Control C. You can then go to my waterfall, save info, input the data right here, and now you can play with it in an easy to use formatting. You can see here all the data is imported. I'm going to create waterfall. And you can see exactly here, the same data is imported and you have all the data here. You can also export the data and bring it back to my waterfall. So you can take it over here. And if you now go to the waterfall overview, you can copy and paste it here and you can change around the logic of each waterfall. It's very important to note that this is a great tool if you wanted to now change it from IR based compounding, or you wanted to change the splits or whatever it is. And that's all I have for you. Let me know if you're interested in this model and I'll send it out to you. Great. Have a good day.